Amen. You can have a seat. You can get out a Bible if you like. In fact, it's highly encouraged, so you can follow along and see that I'm not making this up. But as you do that, let's pray. Father, as we come to your word now, I pray that we would come with the enthusiasm of, as we talked about last week, an army coming to listen to what the King has to say. And God, we know we aren't fighting a physical battle, but a spiritual one. We are in our community in subversive ways. You are our motivation underneath all that we do. And so, Father, I pray that you would equip us now. Equip us to serve you. Equip us to know who we are in Jesus. Equip us to be spreading your love in our community. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So the older kids are staying with us today. Now, I know probably not as exciting as some of the games you play up there. However, as Mr. Devon said, I have a couple things for you. If you want to get some paper or something and write some things down, then I will have a chance at 2 prizes. One, you'll just get a prize if you do that. If you write down the things I'm about to say. Whoever does that, all of you will be entered into a draw. And I know the adults are like, wait, what about me? Hey, if you want to do it, fine. You probably won't win, though. I might give you less votes in the draw. But anyway, if you can write down these things, and I'll hopefully make them fairly clear if you're listening, then if you complete this task, you'll get a prize today, and then you'll be entered in a draw, and I will get you something cooler for next week. So here's your task, kids. First, stay awake. That should be not too difficult, hopefully. Second, I'm going to say a theme for the whole talk, okay? There's going to be a theme we're going to focus on, and if you can write down that theme, doesn't have to be word for word, then that's your second task. Stay awake, write down the theme. Number 3, we're going to talk about some cycles that happen, okay? So something that repeats multiple times, and if you can write down that cycle, then that's task number 3. And finally, near the end, we're going to talk about the needs that we have that God will fill. Okay, there's going to be 2 needs. Okay, so staying awake, writing down the theme, writing the cycle, and the needs that God will fill. And if you can do that, you get a prize. So now those will be scattered through, and I'll try to give you hints along the way so you don't miss it. Anyway, this week, now let's all come together. The kids are with us. Here we go. This week I watched an interesting interview. I don't know if you know who Elon Musk is. You probably heard the name in the news, even if you don't really know who he is. He's the world's richest man at the moment, by net worth anyway. He owns Tesla, electric cars. He owns a bunch of companies, actually. One of those companies being SpaceX. So SpaceX, their mission is basically to make space travel more accessible. Which is they're trying to, and being successful so far, to have reusable rockets, right? So probably in the days when some of you grew up, you saw those giant rockets and it was like one time and it's done, right? But SpaceX has reusable rockets now where parts of the rockets can actually land and be fairly quickly reused, saving a ton of money, billions of dollars for space travel. And Elon Musk, you probably heard a few years ago, he wants to send people to Mars. Now, I'm not commenting on whether I think this is ethical or not, but anyway, he wants to send people to Mars. He believes, in this interview, he's saying he believes that if humanity is to thrive as we should and survive as we should, then we need to be a multi-planetary species. And the interviewer, who's actually really good, I forget his name, but he asked Elon, he said, well, what about the society there? What about when they get there? Is there a risk that, they're cut off from us? They do want to send, Elon over the next 2 decades wants to send over 1 million people to Mars. Okay, ambitious. And so they say, well, what about like they're there? What's going to happen with the people of Mars? And Elon basically said, they will decide. They will decide what their society looks like. They will decide, and he said, I would have some suggestions. And, he talks a little bit about a democracy. But he says this, he says, hopefully they are enlightened so that it can be better than it is here. hopefully they are enlightened. And so, and that philosophy, that idea that, hey, if we could just go somewhere else, or be separated, or have this fresh start, and everything, we could then decide what society should look like. Everyone kind of decides what the rules should be, what it looks like, then we'll be okay. Then that will be better. Okay, that's Elon's view, and he has a very utopian view of future society. But that idea that, if we could just have a fresh start, and we forget what's past and just have a fresh start, and everyone, kind of decides together, and I decide what's good and you decide what's good. That has come and gone in history lots of times, and it's been common, sometimes stronger than others. The idea behind that if we just have a new society with people who are just, thinking better, then, they can decide what's good. That's a type of moral relativism. Okay, I know, kids, that's a big word. Moral relativism is kind of a fancy word for, we'll just do what's good in our own eyes. Right? We're just going to do what we think is right, and, we can kind of conjure up this goodness if only we're given the chance. And often the way that plays out is, I do me, you do you, and, as long as you don't murder me for no good reason, then we'll be okay, right? As long as you don't, invade my space, I'll do what I do, you do what you do. And again, this idea has come and gone many times through history, and I believe we can see it coming back in the last 40 years. And honestly, it sounds good, doesn't it? Like, if we're just, really thinking about what's good, and, what I think is good and what you think is good, then maybe, if we just do what we think is best, then it'll just run smoothly, and, things we'll feel fulfilled. And there's one major problem with this idea, and it's people. People, right? It's great on paper, like we'll just all do what we think is best. But the problem is people. And the Bible is going to show us that very clearly today. So just to catch you up, if you're visiting today, we are working through some of the major stories of the Bible and talking about how they point to Jesus, right? So the whole Bible points to Jesus. And how does it do that as you go through the Old Testament? That's what we've been working through. And so, we had creation and the fall, right? And people, the sin-tainted people, and it spread, right? And there was murder, and it kept spreading and spreading, and God said, it's gotten so bad, we need a reset, and the flood came, right? And there was this reset, and then what happens? Right away, even in that family, sin spreads, and it spreads and spreads, and we see the Tower of Babel, and sin, them going against God, and God says, I'm going to spread them out, I'm going to confuse them, and we're going to have this kind of fresh start. And again, we see that cycle. Now, where we are now, what we talked about the last couple weeks is God's chosen family went into Egypt, became slaves, grew fruitful just like God said. God delivered them out of their slavery. They were brought out, delivered by a mighty hand. They rejected God in the wilderness. They grumbled, and God said, that generation, we're going to let you die in the wilderness. The next generation will go to the promised land. God's land, where it'll be flowing with milk and honey, and it'll be abundant for everyone. If only, he says to this new generation, if only you obey. Just do, what? I'm going to set the boundaries for you. I'm going to set up what life should look like. And if you obey, you will flourish in the land. And the book of Judges comes just after the conquering of the land. They're spreading out, right? This new generation, they've come in under Joshua's leadership. They have this fresh start. And who's read the book of Judges? I mean, you don't have to put up your hand, but probably lots of us have read the book of Judges, and the book of Judges is messed up. Okay, it is messed up, right? And sometimes we go through and we pick like the nice stories, and it's like, look at this character and what they did. But really, the whole book of Judges is just a lot of, people falling short, people, outright evil, and nearly every character in it, nearly, not all of them, but there's these judges, right? That's why it's called Judges. They're raised up to deliver the people of God. Nearly every character has some kind of flaw or something that taints their leadership. Some are better, some are a lot worse, but it's not a book that we want to go through and say like, oh, look at this character, and oh, we should be like this character. The Judges shows basically that God is showing mercy to his people in spite of his people, right? And they're falling apart, and God is still repeatedly keeping to his covenant even when they are breaking it, even when the leaders aren't really a shining example. There aren't too many leaders who are even really pointing to God. There are some. But not too many of them are really, having a relationship with God. But the book shows that God is a covenant-keeping God, that God is a merciful shepherd, rescuing them even as they go astray. And so, we're going to jump into the book of Judges. And as we read, I want you to remember something. And actually, you should just remember this forever. Write it down if you need. When you're reading the Bible, there is always an agenda behind what the author is writing. Okay, and I know that sounds negative, but there's always an agenda. Okay, this is an important thing when you're reading the Bible, an important lesson. The Bible, the authors of the Bible are always writing for theological purposes. Okay? And theological is a big word that just means basically it's about God. They're always writing to show something about God. So these histories, they're not just history. Okay, they are history, but they're not just mere history, right? They are showing something about God. They're teaching something about God, teaching something about God's people, how to relate to God. Okay, and you need to always read and say, what is the author trying to say? Because even when they're recounting history, they're trying to say something. They want you to know something about God and about us. And so the author of Judges, as far as we know, it's Samuel, who comes just after this, but the author of Judges has a purpose. He's showing us the corruption of the human heart and the need for leadership. And the refrain of the book, meaning what's repeated again and again in this book of Judges, is that everyone did as they saw fit in their own eyes. And as you're reading through, we're not going to read it all today, don't worry. But as you're reading through, you see that, and everyone did as they saw fit in their own eyes. And as you're at the start and you're kind of like, and everyone did as they saw fit in their own eyes. Okay, And then you read it, you read a few stories and it comes again and you're like, okay. And then, at the end, that's how the book ends. And by the end, you are like exhausted from how much you cringed reading this book. It gets really, really bad. And it's just putting that human depravity on display. And so the theme for today, hint, the theme for today is this: God will provide the change that we need. God will provide the change that we need. This book is showing how hearts are corrupted and that we need someone to lead us, and God will provide the change that we need. God will provide the one to lead us. God will provide the one who can change our hearts. So kids, if you need more of a hint, the theme is God will provide the change that we need. Okay, so we're not going to read the first chapter because the first chapter is basically this. Israel goes out and they have a battle and they win. And then they have a battle and they win. And they have a battle and they don't quite win. And they let the people stay. And then they have a battle and they didn't win and they let them live here. Okay, and we see this. Judges 1:28. When Israel became stronger, they made the Canaanites serve as forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Now, if you remember from last week, God said, go into the land and drive them out completely, or there'll be problems for you. And then we read this. They get into the land, and they made them serve, but they never drove them out completely. So the picture we get, Israel, remember this nation that doesn't really know how to be a nation. They come in, they're crossing with Joshua into the land, ready to conquer. God's fighting for them, but they come into a land where there's kind of, scattered people. They have a bunch of, this group here, some ites here and some ites there, and they have a whole bunch of people, and they were supposed to get all those people out and say, you get out from our land, this is ours now, right? And we talked a little bit about, the reconciling the political nature of God's people. And we're not going to get into that again, but they're supposed to get out and God says, don't intermingle, don't marry them, don't let them live among you because you will have problems. And what happens is they come into the land, they don't get them out, and there's consequences. And the book of Judges has these cycles, these cycles for the kids to write down of what happens as they let the people stay in the land. So the cycle looks like this. Israel falls into evil. So you could write down evil if you were supposed to write something down. Evil, and then some consequence of their evil. Consequence. Evil and consequence. That might be hard to spell. C-O-N. You could just put cons. C-O-N-S. Evil, consequence. Then Israel, with their consequence of their evil, they cry out, God, help, this is hard, this is terrible, it's not working. And God, if he was me, he would say, duh, like I told you. But no, so there's evil, there's a consequence, and there's a cry for help. Cry for help, evil, consequence, cry for help. And then God sends a deliverer. Evil, consequence, cry. I should have made them all one letter. Evil, consequence, cry, and deliverer. That cycle is on repeat. And you get this rhythm in the book. If you could read really fast and you read this book all the way through, you get this rhythm, this sin and this deliverance. And the sin again, spiraling out of control, even bigger, and then deliverance, and then sin, and then deliverance. And you get this rhythm of sin and really sacrifice. Lots of the judges have to sacrifice something. Sin, sacrifice, deliverance. One judge leaves his family, one judge gives up his child, one judge gives his life. We see this sin, sacrifice, deliverance. And so the stage is set like this. Let's look more closely at Judges chapter 2. And if you don't have a Bible with you, it will be up on the screen. I'm going to skip a few verses here and there, but Judges chapter 2 reads this way. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you out of Egypt and led you into the land I had promised to your fathers. I also said, I will never break my covenant with you. You are not to make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. You are to tear down their altars, but you have not obeyed me. What is this you have done? Therefore I now say, I will not drive out these people before you. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a trap for you. When the angel of the Lord had spoken these words to all the Israelites, the people wept loudly, so they named that place Bochim and offered sacrifices there to the Lord. Previously, I'm in verse 6 now. Oh, that was verse 5 before, so that's easy. Verse 6. Previously, when Joshua had sent the people away, the Israelites had gone to take possession of the land, each to his own inheritance. The people worshipped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime and during the lifetimes of the elders who outlived Joshua. They had seen all the Lord's great works he had done for Israel. But then Joshua died. That's my paraphrase here. Joshua died, and then in verse 10, that whole generation was also gathered to their ancestors. After them, another generation rose up who did not know the Lord or the works he had done for Israel. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The Israelites did what was evil in the Lord's sight. They worshipped the Baals and abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of Egypt. They followed other gods from the surrounding peoples and bowed down to them. They angered the Lord. They abandoned him and worshipped Baal and the Ashtoreths. The Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he handed them over to the marauders who raided them. He sold them to the enemies around them, and they could no longer resist their enemies. Whenever the Israelites went out, the Lord was against them and brought disaster on them, just as he had promised and sworn to them, so they suffered greatly. The Lord raised up judges who saved them from the powers of the marauders, but they did not listen to their judges. Instead, they prostituted themselves with other gods, bowing down to them. They quickly turned from the way of their fathers who had walked in obedience to the Lord's command. They did not do as their fathers did. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for the Israelites, the Lord was with them and saved the people from the power of the enemies while the judge was still alive. The Lord was moved to pity whenever they groaned because of those who were oppressing and afflicting them. Whenever the judge died, the Israelites would act even more corruptly than their fathers, following other gods to serve them and bow in worship to them. They did not turn from their evil practices or obstinate ways. So we get this picture of a spiral, right? That spiral of those cycles. Just the sin, deliverance, and then sin again and deliverance. And it says it got worse and worse and worse. And then the book of Judges goes on to detail some of the stories, some from here, some from there. And we'll go through some of those judges. There's a few kind of major judges in the book of Judges, and then some are just kind of mentioned. But something that's repeated, and I think it's almost every chapter, maybe not quite, but almost every chapter, it kind of starts the cycle with the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So that's where we start. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And then the consequence is that they go to slavery for 8 years. And of course, after 8 years of slavery, Israel cries out and God raises up a judge, Othniel, and they are rescued. And then Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they're put into slavery for 18 years. So 8 before 18. And Israel in slavery for 18 years cries out to the Lord. And then we get this really funny story. I mean, it's lots of judges. It's almost comical. But there's this guy named Ehud, and he is a lefty, which is less common, right? They didn't appreciate people that were different. And if you had a left hand, it was kind of weird. So he's a lefty, and so he could actually hide a sword where, it would be weird for a right-handed person to hide a sword. And so he goes to the king of their oppressors, right? Slavery for 18 years. God raises up Ehud, and he goes to this tyrant king, and they don't check his, I think it says which side it's on, but I imagine left. And they don't check, right? Because most people are right-handed. So he goes to the king, and apparently the king says the Bible is very, very fat. And he takes the sword and he stabs the tyrant king, and it says like the sword just disappears. This is in the Bible. The sword disappears. And so then, Ehud runs away, and the guards actually don't come in because they think that the king is in the bathroom. And this is the way, he's rescued, right? So it's a funny story, but we have this. So then he is the rescue, the deliverer. Then we have another guy who apparently uses a cattle prod to kill 600 Philistines, Shagmar. And then again, Israel, so the judge and deliverance, and it's good for a while, and then they fall again into corruption. And then this time, Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they're put into slavery and harsh oppression, it says, for 20 years. And then we have Deborah the prophetess, and Barak, this general, comes to her, and God gives deliverance through this random woman in a tent peg, and then we have this period of peace again. But then after that period of peace, Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They're oppressed again. There's a famine. It's getting worse. Every time they're displaced, there's this raiding, and of course, Israel cries out. And Gideon is raised up. Interesting story. I think that's chapter 6 to 8 if you want to read that after. But Gideon, who starts so well, kind of gets soured at the end, but he has this hard time believing God, and God convinces him, yes, I'm calling you. And he goes, and Israel is rescued again through the hands of Gideon, and it's powerful, and God shows himself strong. And yet, Israel again falls into evil. Some more judges, Abimelech, Tola, and Jair. And then again, Israel does what is evil in the sight of the Lord. And they're put into, what it just says, they're crushed by their enemies for 18 years. So they cry out. And Jephthah is raised up. And he is rescuing on behalf of God, but ends up losing his daughter. He makes a vow and says, God, whoever comes out of my house when I'm back from battle, if you give us this battle, whoever comes out of my house, I'll give them to you as an offering. Now, your Bible might say burnt offering. The Hebrew actually literally just says offering, which usually does mean burnt offering, but it seems kind of weird that he'd just say, hey, God, I'll sacrifice this person Anyway, we don't know. It just says offering. So I'll give this as an offering, and the person who comes out of his house is his only daughter, his only child. So for Jephthah to rescue Israel, he loses his lineage. He loses any chance of inheritance. His daughter is given. Big sacrifice. We have some more judges. Ibzan and Elon. I didn't even realize when I was talking about Elon at the beginning that Elon is one of the judges, but there you go. And Abdon, And the book, I mean, it's repetitive. I know I just repeated the same thing over and over, basically, but the book is repetitive, and it does that on purpose. The author wants us to feel the repetitiveness. It wants to hammer down that listen, they get a fresh start, and every time they tend to evil. Or they reset, a blank slate, and then it falls apart. And so chapter 13 again, Israel does what is evil in the sight of the Lord, and then they're 40 years in slavery. And it just escalates the whole book, right? Like, okay, 8 years, 18 years, harsh slavery, harsh oppression, getting crushed. Now 40 years, your whole life for a lot of people, they're in slavery. And then God gives this miraculous kind of conception to a barren family. The child is set apart, and he grows up, and he doesn't really live a life that's like the set apart for God life. But God still uses him. God gives him this strength, and he's like chasing women. He's like murdering people for their clothes because he lost a bet. And yet God is using him. And this man, Samson, ends up being betrayed by a foreign woman. He's tortured, he's blinded, and he ends up giving his life to rescue the people of Israel. Falling into sin, corruption, depravity, God rescues, and it happens again. Then the book almost lets go of the idea of the judges, like it's not working. It's not explicit, but it seems that way. And in the end of the book, from chapter 17 to 21, you get this tribal depravity, right? So there was kind of pockets, and Israel was doing, but then you get like this whole tribe, like they went astray. So first you have the Danites, and they start fighting within Israel, right? Not even the enemies anymore. We're fighting within Israel. We want different territory, and they get some idolatry going, and it just seems like where is the law? Where are they following God? And then finally, the book ends with the Benjaminites. And it's messed up. I mean, the last few chapters, they're cutting people into pieces. They're fighting each other. There's like gruesome sexual violence and on and on and on. And you get this sense as you get to the end of the book, like, man, God told them to get the people out of there. They let the people stay. And they became even worse than the people who were in the land. Like, they just fell apart. I mean, this almost reminds me of like, you have that innocent kid who goes to summer camp and they end up being the worst kid there, right? Because all of a sudden they're free and they go wild, right? And it's like that. Like, they were supposed to come in and let the light shine. And they became even worse. And the book ends, chapter 21, verse 25, very abruptly. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever seemed right to him. What we take away from the book of Judges, and the Hebrew authors have a way of not always explicitly saying what they intend us to gather, right? They like us to think, right? Sometimes we want, like, just give me the answer, right? Jesus. But the Hebrew authors often get us to think, what is this book saying? And this book is saying, people cannot be left just to go their own way. In our world, right now, people like to think, kind of the consensus of society, at least from the loud people online, right, is like, hey, if we just all do what we think is okay, if we're just given a chance, it will be right? As the Mars idea, right? Like, if they're just given a blank slate, it'll be good. People have come far enough to be sent off on their own and just do what is right. And the Bible comes in and says, hold on, that is false. When people are left to their own, it falls apart. Okay, there's not this inherent good that, like, if we just get a fresh start, it'll come out of us. The Bible says no. That's not what it looks like. We need something to change us. We need someone to change us. And listen, when there's a lack of this moral standard that everyone has to follow, right? That sounds good, right? Some people say that sounds great because, what's right for me might not be right for you. That's the whole idea behind relativism, right? Personal preference. But that has never turned out well. And we see that in the book of Judges. Because, you have different preferences, and I think this is good, and you think that's good, right? And maybe what you think is good is really bad for me. And then you think something's good. I don't think it's good, but you think it's good, so maybe I'll think it's good, right? And you kind of sway and you kind of move. And eventually, it goes downhill fast and comes to the cliff and falls off the cliff. It's never turned out well. And this book makes it very clear. And it makes our needs very clear. Hint, hint. 2 needs we see in this book. The author is intentionally building these 2 needs. And the first is this. 2 needs. The first need is a need for a leader who points Israel to their God. Israel needs a leader who not just delivers them, not just saves them, but brings them to Yahweh. That's the first need, a leader who leads them to God. The second need is that God's people need to be changed fundamentally, need to be changed on the inside. So what was read earlier in chapter 3, and it's negative kind of, it's real. What Scott read was that, no one seeks for God. No one is good. Not even one. The Bible in the Old Testament tells us, Jeremiah chapter 17 says, the heart, can you throw it up there, Ryan? The heart is more deceitful than anything else and incurable. Who can understand it? When people are left to themselves, the heart is going to go the wrong way. The human heart does not naturally, as it's been infected by sin since the beginning, the human heart does not naturally just, go to where God wants. So God's people need to be changed. 2 needs. Need for a leader to lead them to God, and need for change on the inside. All this stuff, the punishments God said would come, the judgment, the promise of reward, it wasn't changing them. It was behavior modification, really. Like, hey, if you change your behavior, you will have this. And anyone who has kids says, okay, that doesn't work. Right? They need to be changed. Who teaches them to do these things? I don't know. But that's you have this reward, you have this punishment. It's not working. It's not changing them. Behavior modification is not what God is doing. It's not God's way to rescue people. Behavior modification is not what it means to follow God. We need something more. We need someone to lead us, and we need a change. And the book of Judges really ends as a tragedy if left by itself. You're left with an emptiness. You're left with a hole, right? It's like they couldn't do it. They fell apart, and it got worse and worse. And again, like the end there is just disgusting, and you're left with that. Hey, everyone was just doing what was right in their own eyes. No one is seeking after God. But when we take it in context, we see the author wants us to be left there. Because when you're left with a need, you'll be looking for an answer. God was faithful this whole book. God was delivering his people in spite of them, and yet they fell apart. But God doesn't leave his people hanging. So what will he do? How will God fill these needs? Well, God is going to send a king. God is going to send a king. The people need a leader, right? The judges, they're raised up, it falls apart. They're raised up, it falls apart. But God would send a king who would seek him. God would send a king who would draw people into his ways. And if you know the story, David is coming, right? King David is coming. But even King David, it's not enough. But David was pointing to a true king. So Judges leaves you with this need for a king. And when David comes on the scene, David's life is really characterized like the one who comes from David will be this rescuer. Judges sets us up for that need for a rescuer. God will send a king. But also, God will break the cycle. Okay, this cycle has been on repeat forever. There's some kind of blank slate, then people just are overcome by evil. There's some consequences. It breaks God's heart, and so he desires to send a deliverer. But the true deliverer, the true judge, would come and lead the people to God and give them a way to follow. Because listen, when you have a messed up heart, you could have someone leading you, but you're not going to be able to follow properly. Your heart won't go that way. Your heart will always be elsewhere, and you can look like on the outside, like, yeah, I'm doing good things. But if your heart's not changed, you're not going to go in the right way. You're going to mess it up. This book and the whole Bible shows us that you cannot do it. You'll mess it up. Okay? Hearts are infected. And so, as you read through the Bible, God starts to put in these promises. It starts kind of slow, but it gets more and more as the prophets go on. And the promise is that the king will come who will change your hearts. The king will come who will change your hearts. One day, God says, one day I'll fix your hearts. One day I will make it so you can do it. He says, I will write my laws on your hearts. I'll make it so you can obey. I'll pay for all this garbage that's happened through history. I will pay for it. I will pay the price, and I will make my people pure. And God did that. Judges leaves us with this massive problem, this emptiness that no one can fill except God's King, who is Jesus. God's King who can change our hearts, who will change the people from the inside out. And that's what the Bible tells us. We get new hearts. Okay, when you trust in Jesus, it's not just, now I'm adhering to this religion and I'm going to start acting this way. The Bible tells us that actually the Spirit comes and regenerates you. You are born again with a new heart, where that verse that we read in Jeremiah 17, that is the natural heart. This does not apply to Christians. Okay, the heart, it's incurable? Yeah, so we need a new heart. And God has done that in Jesus. God has given us new hearts. God has broken the cycle. God sent the King to lead us, and God made a way to change us. So listen. You can live in that. Naturally, you don't have it in you to just, muster up Christianity, right? And even now, we have new hearts, but we've talked about this a lot. Sin has infected, new hearts, but we still have the same body. We still have the same mind. We still have the same attitudes and all our history, but we've been given a new heart. And so now we can live from that place. But there's a sort of freedom in knowing that, hey, it's not your ability to conjure up goodness that is making you walk with God. It is God giving you something new. The other thing I want to take away from this is that we need to be led. And I know sometimes we like our independence, but we need to embrace the fact that we need to be led. We are made to be led. We need to expect that. We need to plan for it. You are made to serve a king. You are not made to just wander and figure your own way. You are not made to, plan and say, this is what I should do. This is right in my eyes. We've seen that doesn't work. We need to have that posture of followers. And it's interesting that Jesus comes and he starts talking about follow me, follow me, follow me, because we were made to follow our King. Which means we need to be people with open hands, ready to listen, ready to obey. And one more takeaway, kind of implicit in this book, is that God has set out a way for us for a reason. So we talk at our church about the way of Jesus. We know as Christians there are things that God sees as good, and there are things that we know are not right. And there are reasons behind this. And if you were in Israel in that day, why wouldn't you say things like, why can't I worship other gods? Right? I can worship my God, but also other gods. And why wouldn't you say things like, hey, I could marry, this beautiful foreigner, and I can't really find, a woman among my people. So, this beautiful foreigner, why can't I marry this foreigner? And that's the kind of thing they did. Why can't I just do this? Why can't I intermarry? Why can't I worship other gods? And when we think about that, and we might ask the same question. We might ask the exact same questions, honestly, nowadays, right? Why can't I, do this kind of other types of worship, that's popular in our culture? Why can't I marry someone who doesn't know God? And it's because God knows. God knows what happens. God was here for this. God knows the human hearts. He sees how it falls apart when we don't go in His way. God knows what's going to taint us, what's going to pull us away from Him, what's going to be bad for us. And honestly, it's kind of cool that the kids are in here for this, because a lot of us, probably your parents too, if you grow up in the church, you get to that point where you think, why can't I just do other things? And sometimes it's hard to believe, but your parents have experienced the same thing. And God knows. These boundaries that are put around us are not put to, restrict us from something that would be so awesome, but God's like, nope, no fun for you. God puts these things around us. God puts these boundaries. God shows us the way of Jesus so that we can go in the way that's good and that's right, and that will fill us with joy and fulfillment, keeping us away from things that will be bad for us. And then when you push against that, you will find anxiety. You will find a lack of peace. You will find a sadness. You will get hurt. I mean, I'm not saying those things don't come when you're walking with God, because of course we have weak bodies, weak minds, they can come. But pushing against God's way will always lead to those things. I mean, we don't need to really even look at the statistics to know that these things are running rampant in our world. The book of Judges has given us some major problems. But praise God that He has provided the change that we need. God has provided the one who will lead us in the right way, the King, Jesus, and He has provided the one who can change our hearts. So would you join me in praying? I'll invite the music team to come back up. And I want to pray that we would get this. And I want to pray specifically, maybe there's people here, maybe there's people in our kind of extended circles. You know people who, they've heard this, they hear about Jesus, they kind of know, okay, died on the cross, pays for my sin, I don't care that much, maybe they say, or I don't believe it or whatever. I just want to pray that there would be that recognition that we need a change in our hearts, and we need someone to lead us. And if you are here now and you are feeling that, I pray that God would help you submit to that you'd recognize and that you'd give in to His way, to the good way, to the change of heart. So it's not up to you to try and modify your way to goodness, but He can change you from the inside. Let's pray. Father, so often we hear of people who think that they just need to change their actions so they can get to you. I'll go to heaven if I'm good enough. Well, I can't really come to God because I'm not good enough. All these things we hear. And yet you say, come and I will change you. Come and I will lead you. Come and I will show you. Just follow me is what you ask. So I pray, God, you would work that in people here. And all of us know people who have heard this. They don't buy it. They don't want it. They don't think they can do it. God, I just pray you would do a powerful work of change. That your Spirit would draw people to you. That we would see hearts change. That we would see people baptized this summer. God, I just pray you would give us a vision for what could be if we are there telling people of Jesus. And for those of us who do know you, help us to live in that identity that you changed us. We are new. We are righteous. We can walk with you. If only we turn away from the flesh. Only we fight against sin. Lord, that you have welcomed us into your family. Nothing can take that away. God, we rejoice in you. We rejoice that you offer us a way out from this cycle. Help us to walk in your way. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand together. We'll sing one last song.